Hey everyone, welcome to Movie Marathons HQ, where we do movie marathons connected to new releases and where we enjoy and review some of our favorite movies. This video is part of the Avengers Doomsday Movie Marathon, where we are watching one movie every week as we prepare for the release of Avengers Doomsday in December 2026. Today we are discussing Ant-Man, released in 2015 and directed by Peyton Reed but also by Edgar Wright. This is our first time seeing a new character in Phase 2 of the MCU. Peyton Reed came in quite late to the game. Originally, Edgar Wright was attached to this movie to write and direct something related to Ant-Man since 2004, long before Iron Man, long before Marvel Studios was an established entity, though they were making movies around 2004. It was envisioned as a movie where Scott Lang would steal the Ant-Man suit from Hank Pym. However, Edgar Wright departed the project in May 2014 due to, quote, differences in their visions of the film. And so then they were kind of scrambling. They were going to start shooting 2 months after that. So they had to retool the movie. They brought on Peyton Reed, who had been in discussions with Marvel Studios about directing a few other things over the years. So they brought him in. They redid the script a little bit and didn't even move the release date and still somehow made the release date. So they even had some footage that premiered at Comic-Con in 2012 that was shot by Edgar Wright. So they were starting to make it. He said his approach was going to be a Terrence Malick approach to superhero films. So it just wasn't going to fit the MCU as it evolved. So I think it makes sense that he stepped away. It is a shame. Edgar Wright's a pretty great filmmaker, and Peyton Reed isn't. But I do still think Ant-Man works a lot, and this is a lot of fun as a movie. I think it works overall. Overall, I really enjoy it, and it's especially funny. It's kind of the funniest of the MCU, and it's really cool heist type movie as a concept. For positives, I think the casting is really well done, especially Scott Lang and his friends. I like that there are two generations of Ant-Men, and they're both kind of broken down fathers. I think that's a really interesting thing that connects the two. I think the visual effects are great. They kind of take a macro photography type of approach, and I think it's really unique and a visual style that is really fun to see. I think the score by Christoph Beck is pretty great. There is a scene that features a cameo of the Falcon, played by Anthony Mackie, and I think that scene is a heck of a lot of fun to just be smack in the middle of an Ant-Man movie. The finale is really great. The fight at Ant-Man or Scott Lang's house in Cassie's room, but they're miniature, is really fun. And then the finale in the quantum realm is really, really cool, building on the visuals. And I think the humor and Luis's storytelling technique that's employed makes this a really great movie. For negatives, I think the physics of how Ant-Man works don't make any sense to me. And then I also think Evangeline Lilly as Hope Van Dyne is miscast. I don't think she gives a very strong performance. So those are the positives and negatives we'll discuss today. Spoiler alert for Ant-Man. I think the casting in Ant-Man is really great, done by Sarah Hallie Finn, of course, who is exceptional in her talent to find the right actor for the right role. We've got Paul Rudd as Scott Lang. I think he's perfect. I can't see anybody else in the role. He's got the right physique for it. He's got the right comedy and the right kind of personality for Scott Lang, and I think he works really well throughout this whole movie. And I also really like his three friends. Michael Pena as Luis is the standout, but David Dastmalchian as Kurt, and even T.I. as Dave. I think the three of them, the Wombats, as Hank Pym calls them later, I think they're just really great for the roles, and they fit really well. And Michael Douglas as Hank Pym, he's a legend, and I think he does really well in the role. So the casting and the characters are really fun in this movie. We've got two Ant-Men in this movie, and I think they both work for different reasons. So we have Scott Lang, who becomes Ant-Man kind of against his will, and then we have Hank Pym, who was Ant-Man back in the 60s or something, and he's kind of given it up, although he continues being a scientist. I like the flashbacks that they show of him back when he established S.H.I.E.L.D. With Peggy Carter and everything. But I also like that both of these Ant-Men are united by not just their suit and their heroic nature, but that they're both broken down fathers for different reasons. Scott Lang has broken down as a father because he was getting involved in crime, and it was kind of a Robin Hood type thing, but still he was making criminal choices and being involved in criminal activity. So he went to jail and lost out on his relationship with his daughter Cassie. But then Hank Pym, he's also a broken down father because his relationship with his daughter Hope, played by Evangeline Lilly, has also broken down. And there's some reasons and some trauma from his past that caused that. But I just like that both of them have these parental issues, and they both have strained relationships with their daughters. That is kind of their strongest motivation, or this thing that they want to repair. But then they're also these heroes that need to work together. So I think that is a really strong part throughout this whole movie that unifies and moves a plot along in ways that are natural and connective. The visual effects in this movie are also great. They decided to take a macro photography approach, and so that's where you've seen images of a really close up of, say, a flower, and you see the water droplets on the petals, and lots of artistic type things are using macro photography. So they decided to do that in a film sense, and I think it really looks great. There's that scene where Ant-Man first shrinks and he's in the bathtub, and then he kind of goes on this crazy chase throughout his apartment building as he's tiny, and I think it really looks great, and it works well. It helps to establish that this is a unique thing that Ant-Man can do. It gives the viewer a new viewpoint, literally, which is fun to explore. When they get into the quantum realm, I think the visuals there look really great. And it has implications for later on in the MCU, but to establish it here makes sense and kind of works, and looks like an alien realm environment kind of thing, and it kind of opens up your imagination to what could be in there. I also think the Ant-Man suit looks fantastic. It doesn't look like a sleek superhero suit like a lot of the other Avengers suits look. This looks like a motorcycle helmet. They even call it like a motorcycle suit. But I think it looks really great, and the way that it works is pretty cool. So visual effects are a positive. The score in this movie stands out. This one was done by Christoph Beck, and there's an Ant-Man theme that they use again in other movies that's kind of recognizable and the hallmark of Ant-Man. But throughout the whole runtime of this movie, the score comes in and out in really natural and pleasant ways, so that's a positive. There's also the scene where Scott has to break into an old warehouse, but it turns out it's an active Avengers compound. They can't pull out of the mission, so he has to do it anyways. And the Falcon, played by Anthony Mackie, is there sort of guarding the warehouse, and so they have a really interesting fight. We've got a flyer, like they're both not super powered, they just have great suits. Falcon has these wings and all these other things where he can fly around, but it's just because he's great at using a suit. And then Scott Lang doesn't have any powers, but he's got this super suit that it can make him shrink and grow. And so they have a really interesting fight and kind of a fun dynamic there, and that scene really stands out from this movie. I like the finale of this movie. It does follow the same pattern that we had seen at this point in a lot of MCU movies, where we have the hero and then we have a villain who's kind of got the same powers, and so they have to come up with a creative way to overcome the villain. That still happens here. The villain is Darren Cross, played by Corey Stoll, and he's got an Ant-Man suit essentially called the Yellow Jacket, and it's more technologically advanced, but it's the same thing. But I think the reason they can get away with it is because they make really high personal stakes. It happens in Scott's daughter's bedroom, where she's kind of being held hostage by this crazy villain. And I think the villain is kind of good, not super memorable. And as I said before, it's kind of just a copy of the hero, but I think the villain works fine for this movie. But it's a really great fight scene on the trains where even the camera zooms out and you can see that they're just these tiny little things blipping on this train table. So they do some really creative things in the fight here with those high personal stakes, which I think work really well. And then this movie is a heist movie, which is really unique, and we hadn't seen too much of a heist here in the MCU at this point. but this is also definitely a comedy. Guardians of the Galaxy was very funny, and could be considered a comedy as well, but here in Ant-Man, it's definitely a really funny script. There's jokes throughout the whole thing, and I think most of them work. I love the Baskin Robbins stuff towards the beginning, lots of the quips and barbs and things that they do against each other, against all the different characters, work really well. And especially, I love the storytelling mechanic that Luis introduces. If you've seen it, you'll remember it. It's so funny and it's so creative. It's basically the I heard from a friend of a friend of a friend of mine, but then they capture it visually, so you see the friend telling the friend telling the friend, but all with Luis's voiceover and mannerisms and cadence and that kind of thing. It's just a lot of fun and it's really funny. And every time I rewatch those scenes in the two Ant-Man movies, I think it's really hilarious. It's too bad that it's not in the third one, but we'll get to that when we get to that. I just think the humor works throughout this movie, and a comedy is really refreshing in the MCU. For negatives, I don't understand the physics of how Ant-Man works. I don't mean to get into a scientific debate. I'm not a scientist and I'm not a physicist. But the way they describe it is the distance between atoms shrinks. So on the surface, that's fine, and I can suspend my disbelief for a while that they shrink. The scene that really bothers me, and I just don't understand how this could work, is it's towards the end of the movie, and Ant-Man shrinks, and he's running along the top of the barrel of a gun as a security guard is holding the gun. And so, to me, that suggests that Ant-Man weighs as much as a little creature that size would weigh. That's why the guy can hold it up. But then Ant-Man jumps and punches the guy as if he was being punched by a full-sized man. And so that scene just stands out as a contrast. Either he weighs as much as a man when he's running on the gun, in which case the guy would drop the gun as if a full grown person stepped on it. You couldn't hold it up. But then it's either that, or when he gets punched as if it was the strength of a little guy punching you in the cheek. And at that point, I feel like the velocity and the strength over such a small surface area would just like puncture your cheek. It wouldn't knock you back as if you got punched by a full sized human. So that scene stands out, and then it kind of pulls the whole thing apart. Does he weigh as much as a human or does he not? In that dance party scene when he first gets the suit, a human being steps on him and he's able to hold it up. Like an ant can hold so much more than its body weight. So I get it, but I just don't understand the physics of how all this works. And I get it. It's a comic book movie based on fantasy. Um, so maybe it works and you just have to accept that it works how they want it to work. I think it does continue to unravel in Ant-Man and the Wasp, the next movie. But it's a negative for me just because they sort of explain it enough, but then as they show it in action, I feel like it doesn't make sense. And then this negative is a casting one. I've had issues with casting in the past. I mentioned in Guardians of the Galaxy, I don't think Karen Gillan as Nebula is strong at all, and is actually a weak performance. Here in Ant-Man, I think Evangeline Lilly as Hope Van Dyne is not very strong. I think she's okay. Um, she just doesn't seem to bring a lot. She does get more to do in the other movies, but in this one, she's very one note. She's just mad at her dad. And I get it. And when I put myself in the shoes of that character, I would also feel that anger towards the father. But I just don't think Evangeline Lilly elevated it or brought a lot to it, which is too bad. I don't think she's talentless or anything. I just think for this role, I don't really root for her or cheer for her as a character. I don't really get why she and Scott would see something in each other as a romance. Um, so I just don't love it. And I feel like there are other actresses who could do well in this role. So for me, it's a negative. For others, it might not be. And maybe she's the favorite hero of lots of people. But for me, she doesn't work in this movie very well. Now, how might Ant-Man connect to Avengers Doomsday? Well, we know that Paul Rudd is going to be in Doomsday, so he will portray Scott Lang. So I think he's going to have a significant role, likely as an Avenger. His daughter is going to be in it, but at this point in the timeline, she's portrayed by Catherine Newton, and that's been confirmed that Cassie Lang will be in Doomsday. Hope Van Dyne is still alive in the timeline, but she's not on the cast list, so I don't expect to see her. Hank Pym is also alive in the timeline, but I don't expect to see him. He's not on the cast list for Doomsday. And then Darren Cross gets vanquished at the end of this movie, but he does come back later on. I don't think we're going to see him in Doomsday, but we do see him later on in the MCU in a kind of weird retcon. So I think just because we'll see Ant-Man in Doomsday, there's a fair connection here to Doomsday. So that's my review of Ant-Man. What do you think of this movie, and how do you think it might connect to Avengers Doomsday? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. Follow Movie Marathons HQ on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and also on Letterboxd, where you can see all of the movie marathons we have going on right now and the ones that we've done in the past. The next movie in this marathon is Doctor Strange. See you at the movies.